Hey everyone, welcome back to the Global Medical Device Podcast. My name is Etienne Nichols, and today I want to talk about combination products. We haven't covered that a lot on the podcast, but to discuss this topic, I brought on Subhi Saadeh. He is the host of Combinate Podcast, a podcast exploring the world of combination products with over a decade of experience in the pharmaceutical and medical device industries. Subhi is a leading expert on the unique challenges and opportunities presented by products that combine drugs, devices, and or biologics. So Subi serves as the currently as the uh, international committee chair for the Combination Products Coalition and as a member of ASTM Committee E55, and also served as a committee member on AMI's AMI's Combination Products Committee. I will throw out that Subi is an Ironman triathlete and a marathoner, and ultra marathoner. I love that about you. I'll throw one other thing out. Throughout his career, Subi's worked on numerous groundbreaking combination products, holding senior roles in regulatory affairs and product development. On Combinate, he conducts interviews with key opinion leaders, shares insights to help professionals stay current on the latest trends, best practices, and FDA requirements on the combo product space. Subi holds a Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Engineering from University of Illinois, is an ASQ Certified Quality Engineer or CQE, and is also ISO 13485 Lead Auditor from BSI. So what did I miss? Those are some of the highlights that I had. What did I miss or get anything wrong?
I think the only thing you got wrong is leading expert. People say you have a podcast, right? And so how do you feel comfortable like talking about it? And I'm like, well, from my perspective, I have a podcast because I feel like I don't know. And
Yeah.
so I definitely wouldn't call myself a leading expert by any means or an expert at all.
Well,
So that's the
I
only clarification.
I respect that clarification. It makes me think sometimes when people go to the gym, they say, "Why do you go to the gym?" He goes to the gym because he's strong. You're like, no, he goes to the gym because he thinks he's weak and he wants to be
Right.
strong. And so, no, I
That's
respect that
right.
a lot. And you're putting a lot of work into it, regardless of the status of expertise. But Subi, um, I looked on your podcast. You've got a 5-star review on Apple iTunes. We won't talk about how many people reviewed, doesn't matter. But
That's right.
139 episodes. That's a lot of episodes. And I know you've learned a lot from all of those episodes. But maybe before we get into the actual meat of the conversation, I'm curious if you could kind of talk to us about what sparked the idea for the podcast.
Yeah, I had just had my second kid and was just in this kind of I don't know, nebulous spot mentally. And I was thinking about like sort of what my values are, what I'm trying to learn. I was kind of getting ghosted by people that I really wanted to talk to and respected. I'd always been really good at networking, but I felt like as I got to the manager level in big pharma and was trying to reach out to more people in like the senior director, VP space, their time was more limited and basically I wasn't getting the time of day.
Yeah.
And it was during COVID and I'm like, for there was a lot of things going on in the background, right? I had just had my second kid. I was kind of thinking about, well, yeah, as you know, you have your fourth on the way. You kind of go through, it's not like you grow in a linear progression. It's the same thing when it comes to um racing and fitness. Learning is also the same way. So I was in this spot where I was just in a really reflective place and I was thinking about, well, what do I want out of my career? What do I want to learn? And this thought that was in my head that I just couldn't get out was, if I want to be a master at my craft, I need to be producing something
Yeah.
in a way that is consistent. I'm very good at maintaining habits. I'm disciplined, I know that, but I'm not putting myself in a situation where I'm producing almost for the sake of producing as an exercise. Said, well, I could start a blog to have that become habitual.
Sure.
I could, I was thinking about what I could do, and I'm like, I got the gift of gab like nobody's business.
It's true.
I can talk people's ear off. And so it became kind of a two or three bird, one stone kind of thing where I was able to produce something in a way that was consistent and challenge myself, continue to learn, kind of pay yourself first in terms of learning and prioritizing that. If people are expecting an episode a week and I've set that expectation, then I need to devote at least an hour or two a week to producing something. Secondary to that was my ability to connect with people and reach out, get advice and that. And I would also add, we were talking before we started recording, my father passed away when I was young. And so for a long time, I had this uh, itch that I wanted scratched where I would want people's advice and people's guidance and things like that. I was as I grew older. And so that includes career, relationship, life, and so on. And so, that for me was very meaningful and it's been great.
That's really fantastic. I respect that a lot, especially the production for production's sake. And I'm curious if you have been able to identify maybe some of the ways you've changed or the way producing this has impacted you. Maybe, I don't know if it's a guest or an episode or just the process in general, just however you want to tackle that.
I've become a lot more efficient. So I think you said earlier that like, oh, it takes a lot of work. I think it may be perceived as it takes a lot of work, but it doesn't take that long. Even if I'm producing a solo episode where I'm just researching a topic, putting together a script and then recording it, like I feel like I could turn it around in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And um, especially with a lot of tools that are available, it doesn't take that long. And as my brother's a lot faster than me in terms of racing, right? I'm kind of heavy and slow. Um, but as you become more and more fit, the long runs actually take less time. And so like I follow people on Strava, right? And I'll see them knock out a 20-mile run in like 2 hours. And that's their long run for the week.
Yeah.
All their other runs are shorter,
Yeah.
right? Whereas for me to do the 20 miles, it may take me closer to 4 hours.
Right.
And so I think it's just kind of the natural progression of things as you become better and sharper, you become more efficient and it takes a lot less time. And so that's just speaking broadly, but in terms of creative process, I've tried to automate the stuff that I can as much as possible. So like I typically have an intake form that I have people fill out like what are the things that you definitely want to talk about, what are things you don't want to talk about. If they have a bio they'd like to, I love the bio that you gave, like I need that for sure. The summary was nice, but I typically try and have my guest provide me the details because it's um one second, I gotta, you
Yeah.
edit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I got a plug. I don't know if you use your iPhone as a camera, but it's spectacular.
I have thought about doing that. I have not done it. I
Oh,
usually have a
amazing.
webcam, but no, that's a great
Oh,
idea.
wait, I have a 4K webcam. My iPhone's way better.
Really?
Anyways, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, way
Yeah.
better.
All right. Back to it.
So, I try and have my guest do as much of the work as possible because this is something that I realized too, is people are nervous about how they're talked about. And so it unnerves them if they're providing me the bio that's going to go in the show notes. Like
Yeah.
it's a win-win where I don't have to put together the bio and they know what's going to go into the show notes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I use a tool called Descript, which really helps with my editing. I don't know if you use that.
Yep.
10 out of
Yeah.
10, maybe the best money I've spent. Um, And I always just look, that's kind of like the thought that I have is I plan on doing this forever.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no end goal in mind. And so there's no end timeline, I should say, in mind. And so from that point of view, for me to do it for the long haul, I need to make it as easy as possible
Yeah.
so that it becomes near impossible for me to miss.
Right. Either as easy or as pleasurable. You have to smear that all the rough edges for sure. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I could talk about podcasts all day, and maybe someday we're gonna have to do a podcast on podcasts. That gets
Yeah.
meta, but let's focus. Let's kind of move on to the combination products topic. And I didn't ask you to do this, but I wonder if you could give maybe an overview of combination products just so that we can level set with the audience. Do you want to give a, I don't know, we need to kind of set up some boundaries as to what we're talking about when we talk about combination products.
So it's really funny. You had Susan Needle on
Mhm.
before, right after she published her book. And one of the things that she's working on through ASTM is a harmonized set of definitions for combination products. And I think that's one of the challenging areas is around just the philosophy of what is and isn't considered a combination product. So I'll just talk about the FDA and the EU. So the FDA has the drug-led combination products and device-led combination products. According to 21 CFR Part 4, a combination product is a drug and a device, a uh, or a device and a biologic, or a biologic and a drug, like a pharmaceutical, and you could call it a small molecule and a large molecule. Um, and give me just one second.
And we'll put a link in the show notes to Susan Needles. I can't, I can never remember the exact title of that book, the Handbook on Combination Products or the Combination.
Combination product handbook.
Yeah, and we'll put an episode or a link to the episode with Susan Needle as well as a link to her book so that people can check that out as well.
Sorry for the brain freeze.
No, no. Yeah, you
So
were. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, I was going through the definitions of a combination product. So in the U.S., it's a combination of two entities: a drug device, biologic device, or biologic drug. And in the EU, they take a little bit of a different approach, where in the EU, drugs are called medicinal products, and and medical devices are medical devices. And I think what rather than going through the actual definitions, but just
Yeah,
I'll speak to the regulatory frameworks just of the two. In the US, the reason that those regulatory definitions of drug versus device matter is because you have CDRH, which is the center that focuses on devices. You have CBER, which focuses on biologics, CDER, which focuses on drugs, and you have the Office of Combination Products, which tries to work through the management of which office should be kind of the lead reviewer. And one of the Office of Combination Products' main responsibilities is handling the request for designations for, is it a combination product? Is it device-led? Is it drug-led? And so on. In the EU, it's a different model where the competent authorities are responsible for the drug reviews, and EMA is the European Medicines Agency, but they kind of farm out the notified body opinion that's required under the EU MDR Article 117, and have the notified bodies do that review, and that be an input into um, the review of the drug as part of the competent authority review. And
okay.
so with from that perspective, when you look at the definitions in the regulation, you can see like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be reviewed. So the definitions start to make a little bit more sense. But I do think one thing that I think is a problem in terms of harmonization is just the recognition of, is it a combination product or is it not? And so you have the US and the EU, some countries that have started to introduce definitions for combination products, but then you have countries that don't even acknowledge it conceptually, and it's just drug or device.
Yeah. And you mentioned the different branches of the FDA that will handle different sections of the combination product. And so one of the difficulties that I think some of us in the industry kind of get into is the thinking, okay, well, okay, I have a device and I have a biologic or a drug, or maybe all three. I suppose that's the fourth option of a combination product. And it's which entity am I going to submit my, or will my submission go through? Um, the primary mode of action is kind of what determines that. The primary mode of action as far as what part of the combination product is actually mitigating or diagnosing or treating the disease. Um, what happens when for the if you have the drug constituent as the PMOA, what happens with the device constituent, and how does that get reviewed from a regulatory standpoint? Can you speak to that?
You mean in terms of like a pre-market approval?
Yeah, pre-market approval or yeah.
Um, this is my understanding, and I wouldn't say it's, I'm not a regulatory I actually, if I had a nickel for every time I said I'm not a regulatory person, I say it in my the industry meetings when for the international working group, I say it a lot that
Yeah.
I'm not a regulatory person. Um, I
What do you call yourself? I'll edit
oh
some of that out. No worries.
I would say quality more than anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
But so in terms of review, I should say that you submit through the at least if it's drug led. Most of my experience has been drug led, so I can't really speak to device led.
Sure.
If you're following a drug led, you're using the CTD format, the Common Technical Document format, and you're putting some of the device related elements into the CTD format. There's expectations on where those go, and those sections are reviewed by the appropriate sort of device center.
Okay.
And there's a group within FDA that is responsible within CDRH, I should say, that's responsible for reviewing those say functional performance characteristics and that are part of a drug-led combination
Okay.
product.
And I'd like to know what you consider to be some of the biggest misconceptions in drug device integration and so on, or maybe what are some of the biggest difficulties when you have a combination product? I almost want to revise that question and zoom out. Do you see drug or do you see combination product the industry as a whole growing? Because it feels like it's growing, but I don't know what I'm basing that off of.
Can we? I'll answer the question.
Yeah.
Can we do the intro again?
Yeah.
And I can because I didn't say that all opinions are my own. So
Oh,
if we can do
yes.
that, and
Yeah, yeah.
we can do it at the end. We can do it at
Actually,
the end.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but in terms of it growing, I think it's certainly growing. I mean, you see more and more companies investing time, energy, and resources into growing it. And I think, just with the move towards a lot more home use, um, you're seeing, I think, a lot more investment. There's a lot more manufacturing footprint in terms of the CXOs. There's a lot more familiarity. So I think where you may have needed to build out a line to have your first combination product, that's a little bit easier to do nowadays. And so there's less, say, resistance towards technical or regulatory risk, I think, because of that. Um, and I think it's just a bigger focus, right?
Hmm.
Like at least I used to work in the generic space, and they would call these kinds of technologies differentiated drug delivery. And so if you have an existing drug, how do add value to it? You differentiate its ability to how you
Yeah.
deliver it. So
Instead
if
of a
you need
manual
to
syringe, maybe a button push or something,
pre-filled
or on
syringe
body.
or
Yeah.
pen or yeah.
Okay. Interesting. One of the things that I remember being a difficult when I first started getting interested in combination products was co-packed versus single packed versus single entity. I don't know if you can speak to that or if you can elucidate on that subject any.
Yeah, and so now you're getting into sort of the second level of definitions, and this is where the U.S. and EU definitions start to differ. But I'll focus on the ones that you mentioned.
Sure.
Single entity is integrated, where like a pre-filled syringe, you have a primary container that includes a device, and once you open the package, you take the product out, it's all there. So pre-filled syringe, auto injector, pen injector, those are single entity. Um, Co-packaged are things like kits. where you open up the box and it has maybe the vial, maybe it could be a vial of lyophilized drug, another vial of diluent, a syringe, a vial adapter, whatever, a needle, and a set of instructions on how to use the product. It could just be a vial and syringe.
Yeah.
That's a really simple co-pack, but everything you need to do, you need to use in the bot is in the box, and you're effectively being told, use this component with this drug,
Okay.
use this device with this drug.
Yeah.
Um, and the third one is cross-labeled, where you're told, use this product specifically with this other standalone device.
Okay.
And so, this is intended for use with this only. And I've seen that. I used to work in the in medical devices only. Like my background is all medical device basically. And you'd see that with devices where you have like a hardware and it says only use with the disposables. And so that's kind of uh similar to cross-labeled, where they both say use with each other.
Okay. You mentioned the different layers of definitions within combination products, and I do think definitions is one of the biggest hurdles to overcome when it comes to a new person coming into the combination product industry. I'm sure there's a lot more. There's some technical difficulties to overcome as well, but definitions is certainly one of those hurdles. How many layers of would we need to go to really
I,
fully understand?
I don't think this is, I don't think that this is like a form. This is just sort of how I think about it, in
Yeah.
that there is no, like, level one combo product definition, level two. It's just, when I think drug led, device led, that's, you're saying one characteristic about the combination product.
Mhm.
And when you say single integral, or you're saying integrated versus cross-labeled versus uh co-packaged, you're saying something else.
Yeah.
And so that's all I was
Yeah.
trying to say.
No, that makes sense. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions or the biggest pitfalls that someone needs to overcome when it comes to entering this industry?
When it comes to combination products specifically,
Yeah.
um, I don't know that I'd call it a misconception. I think that there's as part of my podcast, I've gotten to get a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah.
One of the things I don't like is that sometimes device people are used to a certain way, and they go into pharma and things are done a little bit differently.
Sure.
Um, and they think that, you know, because they do things differently, they don't know how to do devices. And I see this where, people who are legacy devices will come into a pharma company, and they will try to be understood before they understand. And I think that um, one of the misconceptions, in my opinion, N of one, this opinion only represents me, is that drugs and device are super different. And one of the people that I love, that I've gotten to meet through my podcast, is Larry Mager. He was actually on your show a while back, where I think you guys talked about management review or management
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah.
He's a quality guy. And he was, after he got introduced into combination products um, in the last couple of years, and he said this on my podcast. He said, um, combination pro drugs are not really a lot different than devices. What's different is how they measure product quality.
Hmm.
Um, And I really like that, because we get into the part four and the nuances between the QMS differences and stuff like that. And the reality is, that's the framework that was set up because of how the regulations were written. So you have a set of pharma regulations, you have a set of device regulations. This is how they were bridged in the current situation, right? And
So,
that's a regulatory legislation
yeah.
concern. It's not a product quality concern. There are differences in terms of how you measure devices and drugs, but I don't think that entering it from it's a product.
They might not have been philosophically different had they been allowed to evolve on their own in the industry without regulatory oversight to a certain extent, statistical
No,
sampling,
no,
for
no.
example.
That's not what I was saying. I was saying more that the way that and I really like part four actually, but the
Sure.
way that that's set up is against the backdrop of what was set up before.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's a
It's
bad
not
thing.
it's not because drugs and devices are inherently different. It's,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because of how the drug and device regulations and system was set up
Yeah.
prior.
So having said that, you mentioned part four. I can't remember when did it come out? 2013. I think I looked this
Yeah.
up at one point. Anyway, a while back. There's a recent update to it with QMSR. It seems like it flew under the radar a little bit. Everybody's talking about how 21 CFR Part 820 is changing, but 21 CFR Part 4 is changing slightly as well. I wonder, have you looked into that? Can you speak to it any?
I did a whole solo episode on QMSR, just kind of and so I put out another episode recently on um a couple of the guidances that came out through EMA and another one through FDA on platforms. I found personally, so going back to learning,
Well,
that
we'll
just
put links in the show notes, by the way, to
yeah.
those episodes so people can
Yeah,
find those.
so basically there's one where I just go through the QMSR just to read it and some of the observation. Basically, I wanted to have a few guests on to talk through QMSR, but I didn't want to just ask them what's changing,
Yeah,
right? Without actually kind of reading it in detail. And so I did an episode where I did read it in detail and use that to prep for those. And so there's maybe 3 or 4 episodes just focused on QMSR that folks can check out. And the differences, all of these things are in the weeds, right? So
sure.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to speak to,
What
but
I'd like to get into is how are there any specific episodes or specific guests that really stand out that you've learned that maybe you wouldn't have come across had you not interviewed that person? When you think about your podcast and what you've done.
yeah. And so that's kind of the you and I have actually talked about this before. I think one of the beauties of combination products, why I love it so much, is you can focus on pharma topics and be under within the folder of combination products. You can focus on device topics, be within the same folder of device, be under combination products, and you can focus on combination products and still be. And so there's a lot that, I was just kind of going through the list of episodes
I know.
yesterday or a couple of days ago, and I was like, what are some things that I would have not really been able to learn if I was just focused on kind of the day-to-day work. So um I did an episode with Michelle Lott on FOIA,
Yeah.
and
Foya.
basic
I'm not
FOIA,
familiar.
Freedom of Information Act.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and what is accessible, what's not accessible, what to expect, what is the timeline, and so that was something that I would have never really needed to, but I remember being in a conversation and hearing like an issue with FOIA requests, and so I'm like, I know Michelle posts a lot about FOIA and some of the stuff that um she's gathered through that. And so I did an episode on that's one of those like oddball things that I would have never spent time on. Temperature mapping, another one. Um, I've done 4 or maybe 5 episodes on sterilization methods. And so I did one on steam sterilization, one on irradiation, one on gas sterilization, and one on novel sterilization methods. Um, Waste management, how to deal with a lot of the kind of lab waste that happens, and what the regulations are with that.
Can I interject just for a moment to go back to
Yeah,
sterilization? Not to get too detailed with it, but I know there's a big push away from ETO right now, and a lot of people are into gamma or yeah, how to say this. I think
prioritizing it. Yeah,
yeah, but there's an even more environmental friendly way that I just like to bring up to people, and I'm forgetting it right now. I feel I want to say it's
e-beam.
not e-beam. Oh, hydrogen or
Oh, VHP,
uh
vaporized hydrogen peroxide.
yeah, I think that could be it. Do you have an opinion on the different methods such as
Not an
hydrogen
expert,
method? Yeah. We'll have
not
to
an expert in it.
we'll put an episode link to one of those because I think there's some interesting things coming out with sterilization. But anyway, go on.
For sure.
You've got a lot of different things here.
Market access.
Yeah.
Not I've done a handful of episodes on that, something that I would have never needed to really get involved in when the information when the excuse me when the Inflation Reduction Act came out. I did an episode with a professor just talking about what's coming through with that because there was a lot of discussion happening, scientific, non-scientific speech. And you know, one thing that's talked about a lot is sort of the drug marketing, um, you know, the different laws and
Yeah.
approaches internationally. And so I've done, you know, two episodes on that, one on scientific speech, one on non-scientific speech. Um, and
Let
yeah,
me
I think it's basically you know, if whenever I hear of a topic, I just kind of put a pin in it and I will spend a
yeah.
few minutes on LinkedIn and be like, hey, who can teach me about this?
There was, and I love that approach. And maybe I'll just put a bug in your ear. Maybe you've already covered this topic. I don't know. I remember last year um, hearing about how there was a suggestion that there was a bill coming through that they were planning to regulate the pricing of certain pharmaceuticals if it had a government grant attached to it, the development of it, to the point that the government could come in and take some of the IP if it had a, and I don't know if that bill passed or not, but I was curious if you'd heard of that one. And if not, we'll just maybe we'll circle back and get to that. But I love the broad range of topics that you've covered. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, I like I said, I don't really there's no real like method to it. I'm not like here are the topics that I'm going to cover. It's usually just based on curiosity.
Follow your
And
curiosity. Yeah,
what you might be talking about is the Inflation Reduction Act.
could be.
Maybe not. But yeah, you can listen to
I've
that
stayed out of
episode.
some of the legislative, but I think you've convinced me to get back more into that because that's I mean,
It's really interesting. I find that to be really interesting because we get so focused on the technical.
mhm,
Um, and I think it's kind of like you know, in every quality manual, there's the pyramid.
mhm,
You know what I'm talking about?
yep,
That like how a bill becomes a law kind of thing. Starts with regulation, then standards, then internal standards, then or excuse me, then internal policies and so on and so forth down to, you know, SOPs and work instructions and that. I think there's another pyramid that's on top of that.
yeah,
And regulations come from somewhere.
right,
And I think just understanding that, like the platform guidance that just came out on designated platform technologies um, excludes devices as a platform. It excludes, like, for example, let's say I have um, a you know, a syringe that's being used or an auto injector that's being used across a bunch of different drug products. I couldn't use the designated platform pathway that's being set up through the new FDA process.
okay,
Um, Based on the definitions that are set up, you can't do that. Well, then you'd say, well, why not just adjust the definition to say, you know, it could be a device technology, for example, because the definition says it needs to be an essential part of the drug. It needs to be replicable basically in the same fashion across other drugs, and it needs to have a clear essential what I think they call it significant efficiency or something, where not only is it part of the where it's an element of the drug that's needed, not only is it replicable for other drugs in the same sort of fashion that it's used, but it also needs to be meaningful in terms of its ability to be scaled across different drugs. Um, you know, a prefilled syringe doesn't fit that bill technically. And so you'd say, well, why not just change it a little bit to include that? Because the definition in the legislation has those items. And so you can
Ah,
only guide and you can only regulate within the uh, goalposts of what's in the legislation
right.
because that's the law.
I love that pyramid above the pyramid that you're mentioning because it's making me think almost. So you go up to the regulation, you read the regulation, you go up to the legislation, whatever act that or bill that was passed that influenced that regulation, but then you go above that and beyond and say, okay, well, what is happening in the industry that's causing this group of people to say we need legislation for this? I mean, I think about the changes with QMSR to globally harmonize Part 820 with ISO 1345, or the LDT ruling that will now consider laboratory developed tests as IVDs. So there's something that's happened potentially that has influenced the government to try to change how the industry is approaching this. So I'm coming to a point here. I'll stop this TED talk here in just a second. But
Yeah.
if we're able to see those trends and go all the way up the chain to that, you could potentially be the teacher to those people enforcing or writing those legislative acts to say, I mean, I know you're on several different committees, but I've seen this particularly with the LDT proposed and final ruling where people in the industry are trying to educate those people at the top so that whatever does come down the chain is not going to negatively impact the industry. So I think that's an interesting responsibility that a medtech professional could take on themselves by approaching this the legislation this way from this triangle that you're talking about. It's really interesting.
And I think I mean, it's funny. There's what one episode I did with someone I really look up to. Her name is Jane True, and she talked about the Minto method
Okay.
in terms of how she puts together presentations. She was a management consultant, I think, for a part of her career, and I've seen her present, and her presentations are amazing. And so she introduced me to this concept of Minto, and Minto uses pyramids. And so I kind of joke because I'm Middle Eastern that whenever I present, you'll probably see a pyramid. And so a lot of times I write on an iPad. Um, and so a lot of times I'll have like a hand-drawn pyramid in a lot of my presentations. But I think when you talk about the differences in terms of being able to influence, there's the sort of bottom rung of the ladder where you do advocacy, where you're trying to influence, for example, guidances and things like that. And then you kind of go up the chain into um, trying to influence policy in terms of regulation, lobbying, and so on as you go up the chain all the way up to legislation.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that as well. We're going to have a lot of links in the show notes of those
Yeah,
listening. This is your jumping off point into both combination product and Subi's podcast. So, um, one other question I might have because you do a lot of endurance training, it seems like, and I love your office setup and the things that you've got going on. I'm curious how you balance technical and business aspects. I don't know if you have any suggestions or secrets or advice.
I'd say I have almost no business acumen and little technical. But I just I'm good at following a plan. I don't think I remember once I was sitting down with someone that has had a lot of life experience, and I was it was after I had my first kid, and she was going through a sleep regression,
Mm,
and I was just asking him how he balances things because he has 5 or 6 kids, right? And he goes, balance is not like this, balance is like this.
mm.
And so basically get this idea out of your head that it's going to be, if I give everything equal time, then um I'll be good money. And basically what I started to try to do a little bit more, and I'm not amazing at it by any means, is just focusing on, is this something that gives me energy or is it something that doesn't? And so, for example, I'll record a podcast for a half hour or 45 minutes, and I'll be ultra productive that day. Like if I'm recording in the morning, I'm like, I got juice for the whole day.
Yeah.
And then, another day it may not be so. And so I find that for me, like running or lifting or something like that, it's a green activity. I'm usually more buzzed and, excited after doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and I just try and do that. I will say for me, what's been just tremendously helpful is having a coach and I try and have coaching mentors because it's one thing to try and go and do something. It's another thing to try and figure out the appropriate course of action, program it, and then go and do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that idea. I mean, I've had different types of coaches over the years, but I'm curious what your approach is do you mean to coach more than just from a physical standpoint, from a career standpoint, or how do you can you elaborate a little bit?
I think generally like the coaching is just paid advice, right? So whether it's podcast coaching, I hired a podcast coach for a couple of months, and they were really helpful in
Nice.
just helping me optimize. Um, I have a coach for, endurance training that helped me do my Ironman last year, and I brought him back because I just found that I was spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to program things, and is it 3 days this and 4 days that, and it was just a lot of mental energy that was unnecessarily spent. And so now what I'm working with him on is just figuring out for the long haul, what does a good system look like that I can just plug and play. And then eventually, I think, the goal of any coach is to work themselves out of your life. And sometimes, you need a coach for a year. Sometimes you only need them for a couple months. Um, but I think broadly speaking, I think it's great to have coaching, paid or unpaid guidance, in
Yeah.
any area that you can. Like it's a balance, right, between trying on your own, um, but I kind of, at least in my own life progression, I spent a lot of time trying on my own and sort of running in place before I got to the point where I'm like, I know I'm a hard worker, I know I'm disciplined, and so those two things combined with getting guidance and coaching, and that is really helpful. I think I have seen with some people where they are so into the idea of getting guidance and coaching that it may be the opposite, where
Yeah.
it's stopping. Yeah, I'm kind of usually in the position where I know I'm going to be doing something, and if I find myself kind of running in place for a long time, I think it's time for guidance because it's
Yeah.
not working.
Yeah. Reach that ceiling before you hire someone to help you break out, make it taller.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Um, okay, let's go back to combination products just briefly. I want to ask you a question to see if there's anything we should be thinking about. Are there any trends or um anything that would be helpful for people to know about that you've just seen or been aware of in recent months or years?
For combination products specifically,
Yeah.
trends.
And I'll define how I look at trends versus fads. And so fads I look at as just waves in the ocean that, hey, if you can ride them, ride them. But trends are the tide that you can't fight. It's coming.
Um,
And if nothing comes to mind, we can cut this out. It's no big deal. It's kind of a bad spot.
I'm thinking about it. I think that basically what I was talking about, I don't know that I would call it a trend. It's maybe more of a hope. Um,
Okay.
one of the companies that I worked at started getting to this point where they sort of realized that having standalone device groups within a pharma company was sort of an inefficient way to manage combination product development. And it's not that you don't need those device experts, but um, setting them up in a way where, oh, they're this different group and not doing a full mapping into the organization, full mapping into your product development process, full mapping into your QMS, where it's just integrated. They are no different than anyone else. um, I think that my hope is that the attitude will change to be a little bit more holistic. But I think just given how growing pains naturally happen, you need to have them be
Yeah.
separate before you can mend them together.
I like that. That is a good hope. I respect that. And having worked in a combination product company myself, I can see the different perspectives and so they're very really valuable, but if they are by themselves, they don't really get that crossover pollination, I guess. Um, to think about, I guess one more show note link that I'd like to have is there an episode that you look back on over all of the 139 episodes you've done and you think, hey, if you're going to listen to one of my episodes, check this one out because man, this one was good. Is there a favorite?
Um, I won't say an interview because it's like trying to pick who's your favorite kid. So I would say all of the guests have had an impact on me for sure. Um and and so I won't say that. I will say this. Quality is Free is maybe the best book I've ever read. One
Bill
of
Crosby?
for sure. Yeah, Phil Crosby. I would say it's top three, including, things like religious books and things like others. It's one of my favorite books ever. Um, and so I did an episode on Quality is Free. And so I think people if I were to say one episode to check out, I'd say that. And just because I would hope that it would inspire you to read the book because I think it's a great book.
You mentioned books in general. What would be your favorite book, either to gift somebody or to or that someone has recommended to you?
Quality is Free.
Okay.
If you want another one, I can give you plenty of others, but I like Mastery by Robert Greene. Um,
Huh.
I like uh what is it called? The Viktor Frankl book,
Oh, yes. Man's Search for Meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning. I love that book.
Yes.
Naveen Agarwal recommended it to me. Really, really love that book.
Really? Okay. Yeah, read that book many years ago, and actually read The Diary of Anne Frank right before going to Amsterdam, and that was pretty impactful for me, just as the father of a daughter now. That was um, pretty impactful. So that's a good one. Okay, if there's one thing you would want the
I would
audience,
say if I can
yeah,
add
yeah,
one more book,
please.
Bottle of Lies is a good book if you work in pharma. It's a New York Times bestseller written by Catherine Ebon. I actually interviewed her. Um, and she has a whole there's a lot of the book that's focused on this FDA inspector named Peter Baker, who I also interviewed. Um, and that was such a cool episode. Just hearing his perspective, some of the stuff that he was able to uncover in his inspections overseas. Um, so that book is really good, and it kind of reads like a story, even though it's all true.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Definitely going to include that in the show notes. So two episodes on that book, basically, to a certain degree.
The, the second one was a lot more also on data integrity with
Yeah,
with
with
Peter.
Peter Baker. Okay. Very cool. If there's one thing you'd want the audience to walk away with, what would that one thing be from this episode?
Um, yeah, I would say that maybe just kind of going back to how I got started. So what one of the big sort of growth spurt moments happened for me as I was starting the show, and I was working at Pfizer at the time. And I was trying to figure out, well, if, for example, I wanted to write an article about acceptance sampling or something that's, whatever, or talk about a guidance document, like what are the guardrails? And, I tend to be pretty risk averse when it comes to you actually put out an episode, you put out a couple videos and you talked about how you're sort of self-conscious, I think, when it comes to videos,
Yeah, a
right?
little bit.
Yeah, me too, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm exactly like that. Um, and so, one thing that was just like kind of pound into my head is, you know, doing things like, you know, blogging or podcasting or publishing articles or whatever, you're not doing anything wrong by doing that. And I remember meeting with the non-clinical publishing team and saying, "Hey, I have this idea of a podcast. Like, what would I need to do?" And they're like, "Are you going to talk about any Pfizer products?" And I'm like, "No." Like, are you going to talk about any Pfizer processes? No. And so
Yeah.
it was just that. And so I recorded a couple episodes and I sent it and got it more kind of formally cleared. I talked to legal, I talked to the social media team and all of that. And it was like across the board. Like if you're that's and actually when I talked to the non-clinical publishing team, that what the guy told me is like, Subi, part of people's jobs is actually publishing. And
Interesting.
so another way to think about it is like for some people, this is like a requirement. Like I'd be asking them, what have you published?
Yeah.
And so I would just obviously you have to be um you have to have good sense, right? But at the same time, you're not doing anything wrong by learning and publishing or posting on LinkedIn and that.
Yeah, being a lifelong learner is so valuable. And companies that recognize that, I think, are the best companies. If they recognize their employees are striving to learn and really teaching others is one of the best ways you can really instill that knowledge into yourself. So writing it down. I have a saying that I don't know where I got this saying. I know it didn't come from me, but I never knew what I thought until I wrote it down. And I'm sort of a believer in writing for that reason because I never really know exactly what I think until I write it. And I think it's similar with this publishing. So I think that's a really great piece of advice. Produce something for the sake of production and pursue your curiosity like you have. It's really cool. Any last piece of advice, or where can people find you? Is there any one particular place you like better than others?
LinkedIn, the podcast website is letscombinate.com. All the episodes are there. If you have any topics you'd like covered or guests that you feel like would be actually, I will say some of my best guests have actually reached out to me, and yeah. So if you feel like you'd be a great guest or have a topic that you feel like would be great, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. And I will reemphasize what he said because it is so valuable when people reach out, even just from a listener standpoint, and say, "Hey, I'd love it if you cover this topic." That is really valuable feedback. So I'm sure he'd love to hear that. He's not just saying it. As a fellow podcaster, I personally really appreciate it when people recommend topics. Thank you so much, Subi. I really appreciate it. This has been fun. I hope everybody will check out the show notes. We are going to have a lot of different links to different episodes that Subi's done, maybe some episodes with Susan Needle that I've done, and just a few different books that you can check out if you're interested in those. In the meantime, really appreciate you all listening. We'll let you guys get back to the rest of your day and take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Etienne.